I was gonna try to make a few. I was gonna try to make a few basic distinctions between uh, the robot and the human, animal, etc. Um, and the basic quality is just that you have randomness. And the randomness doesn't mean that determinism has to be broken. It just means that it can be divided by determinism basically infinitely, and that's how you end up with like a hyperbolic um, mode of thinking. In a hyperbolic mode of thinking, you would just have essentially uh, something above the line of infinity and something below the line of infinity that kind of draws uh, the masses, the sheep or whatever, the animals. Um, like this would just be learned things. So, and it is kind of up for debate whether or not that is nature or nurture. And because of just a sadomasochistic quality that humans, animals have, etc. And just because of sadomasochism, the ability to see pain or the ability to feel pain and the tolerance of whether or not you actually uh, learn to tolerate seeing the pain or the fact that you would actually learn to, you know, it'd be better to feel pain yourself. So all that triggering shit and all that stuff that would allow a human or an animal to be a human or an animal, um, evolutionarily, you could say is up for debate with nurture. Nurture being the quality of psychology. So yeah, if you keep an animal or if you lock a wild cat, okay, you lock a wild cat like a bobcat, um, something like that, or a wild dog like a fox or a wolf or something in a cage. So a non-domesticated animal, and uh, you hold that animal in a cage, right? For like for fur. Um, that animal's going to be squawking. It's going to be going crazy. Um, it's never been in a cage before, even with the wild cats. I mean, if you have like a feral cat and it gets sterilized and you throw it into an apartment, it's not going to want to ever stay in your apartment. It's not. It wasn't brought up like that. And you could even notice it um, in a variety of animals. Like if you had a kitten, okay, if you had a domesticated kitten, and you let it outside, it wouldn't really go far. Okay, I've done that experiment. Well, I've done both of those experiments, and yeah, it doesn't work. Um, Over time, you could say psychological inputs or certain pain, like sadomasochistically, that it wasn't going to be able to tolerate, it would just defer to eventually learning to be domesticated. But if you allowed that thing to be, if you allowed that animal to be feral or wild, it'd probably run back to its old nature. Is sort of what I'd say is what is theoretically it's a what I'd say is it I would say that's what it's theoretically going to do, since animals on that level aren't really able to deal with learning and things like that. It's like a miracle if the cat doesn't run away or something, that type of thing. But yeah, in terms of like locking a wild dog in a cage or a wild cat, like a wild carnivorous cat or a wild carnivorous dog, and you lock it in its cage for its fur. Um, you're obviously not dealing with a genetic argument anymore. You're dealing with a sadomasochistic argument, okay? And sadomasochistic has been around forever and it's still around. Um, and yeah, it's a big problem. And in terms of this homosexuality thing, because homosexuality is like a thing that is supposed to be is homosexuality is basically a thing that's determined that is supposed to make us go extinct. And so I mean, in terms of this like religious idea, the religious idea is that, oh well, we won't have heaven on earth or whatever the hell they think. We can't be fruitful and multiply. I mean, that's all they care about. All they care about is responsible sex, and they're never going to be able to have responsible sex. They can't make responsible human beings. They don't care about animals in nature eating each other's asses out and like munching on colons for dinner. They don't care about that stuff. All they care about is be fruitful and multiply. I mean, it's the Torah. It's literally they care about the Jewish Torah: be fruitful, multiply, and what was the other one I just said? I don't know, some other bullshit. But just um, responsible sex. Like you're just here to procreate, Adam and Eve, all that stuff. Uh, if it's not white Adam and Eve, it's brown Adam and Eve. If it's not brown, it's black. If it's not black, it's yellow. uh, and so forth and whatnot. And that's how just the story goes. You just associate yourself with who you are to these religious stories, and you say, okay, yeah, religious, be fruitful, multiply. Um, and uh, anybody who cannot handle the nurture that is not going to contribute to the idea of reproduction will just um, is a detriment to the community, is a detriment to the whole of the community, and they have to be drawn out and they have to be purified and all that stuff. And that's a sadomasochistic idea. It doesn't involve homosexuality being genetic at all. Okay, evolution technically does involve homosexuality being genetic, in that there are different variations of brain thinking. I just haven't gotten into it. I'm not saying that I'm not a full firm believer in it, but I definitely would believe that if somebody was sodomized, like molested or something, then that there'd have to be I mean, there should be a qualitative nature to that. But I mean, that's again a nurture argument, and there just has to be arguments against evolution, and every single argument against evolution has to be psychological. You can't really have philosophical ideas that are going to be against evolution. I guess that's what I've learned, because evolution really is meant to turn the spear into a machine gun, and it's supposed to turn, the birth rate, the 10% birth rate into 100% birth rate and things like that. Um, that's sort of evolution's contingency, but in terms of that being the full idea of evolution, no, I don't think that's correct. Especially because oil wasn't going to last forever, technology wasn't going to last forever. So we don't see that as a real implementation, or we don't see that as a real nurture idea. We see that as a real nature idea that, well, we've adopted, sorry, not adopted, we've adapted to a new way of life, like having a 100% birth rate, and therefore our birth rate is always going to be um, 100%. Now it goes back to this hyperbolic idea where you have birth rate in the past was 10% and birth rate now is 100%. And then you have an infinite line of contingency, and one contingency would be in the middle. You have one contingency saying that we've adapted to these new ways, and we're going to be able to further implement these ideas into the future. Now, you have to understand that that's only going in one direction. In the opposite direction, you have to have another force saying that uh, we are we are going to go back to the same. I mean, I'm not saying that we're going to go back to like a 10% birth rate. Okay, like each woman is going to try to have 10 kids, and there's only going to be one that survives. I'm not exactly saying that, but I'm definitely saying that the environment definitely has to affect the contingency of the birth rate. So Darwinism was never about really stopping religion, but the whole idea of using technology and things like that, or with humans and all this stuff. I mean, I should get more into it, so correct me if I'm wrong. But building on top of ideas and building on top of ideas, or denouncing the idea of history repeats itself. I mean, these are very applicable things to trying to have sex responsibly in a society. And until people understand that they can never have sex responsibly, they'll never be able to um, be on this positive infinite line of thinking and like attribution to our society, because our society really isn't working like that. It's working in tendency with an infinite negative line as well, and that's just a hyperbolic way of thinking. it's um it's a triangle on top of an inverted triangle with like an infinite line in the middle, two arrows going out, and you have, your negative and your positive. I would say that that's hyperbolic thinking. And my point is that that's not what a robot can do. And my argument for the robot is really that there is, I mean, in terms of Taylorism, that the Taylorist idea that, or Bezoist idea, I think is what it's conformed to since labor and unions, even though it was for Henry Ford, I believe, in assembling the car, and now it's become Amazon, and you're just basically uh, being as being as efficient as you can with production line like transportation and all that. Um, it's a definite efficiency argument, but it's very naive to say that the efficiency argument is going to be carried into anything that is really applicable to real life. Like you could say that you basically say that objects like the banking system or objects like the grocery store or real estate or things like this, yes, they have Taylorist efficiency. Their efficiency is embedded in their ideas or the Fed. There's an efficiency in there. It's not really accepting that everything going on right now is the best idea, but it's just not being naive that just because what we have right now isn't the best, that is going to eventually improve. So, I mean, that's my argument with Taylorism and the fact that they try to like opine that humans are humans are now like turning into these robots or whatever, or slavery is really roboticism for humans because they just go through the production line and they just do the same thing and they get in line and they go home and they eat their meal and all that. I mean, that is Taylorism, but it doesn't mean that there is real. It doesn't mean that there's real loss. I mean, it's also Taylorism or Bezosism. It's also supposed to create huge amounts of hiring and firing, because if you don't comply, you're gone. If you don't do the perfect job or you complain, or anything like that, you're gone because you're so replaceable. And it's such a refined system, especially if every um, retail production line has caught on, then yeah, it's everywhere, and you know what you're in for, et cetera, et cetera. This also creates a this also can create something in terms of psychology. I mean, essentially, that's what was happening. That's what was happening with psychology. I mean, you have the Federal Reserve, you have Taylorism, or you have Taylorism and then the Federal Reserve, and then you have psychology, basically. And psychology is also a form of control in terms of what's happening with the Great Depression, and how there might be some banksters being able to control the system, I would say. Um, this isn't really usually for or against the advantage of the system, like also like the housing crisis. But yeah, I kind of agree that these inflations are really just going to be temporal inflations. I mean, all of these inflations are just going to be temporal inflations that eventually lead to a full-on deflation of the actual system. So I think that's pretty obvious. So I mean, again, if you have a Great Depression, you can actually renovate your government system and you can start, Social Security and things like that, and it's looked at as a very positive thing, right? But if you have a Great Depression and you've already started a restoration process with Social Security, then that Social Security system is basically worthless. So how soon, you're basically asking yourself how soon um, in a democracy will the social security system be absolutely worthless? And if you say something like, well, if China cuts off production, which I don't think they can, again, China's already selling us stuff, and the idea is that we're going to run that system into the ground. Also, I mean, because if China stops selling us stuff, essentially they'd be in Japan's market. But I mean, would we also be, would we also be, like, would our economy be futile in the sense that if China just stopped enforcing its production to go to us, or stop exporting things to us, and we stop importing? We're not going to stop importing things from China, but if they stop exporting to us, are we going to go to war with them? I mean, is that like, I'm pretty sure that that's what would make the most sense, especially if they're just trying to drive up fake inflations. Like, I'm not saying inflations are totally fake in the special sense. They're relative to everybody, all the peasants, so to speak, all the citizens, so to speak. Um, but the general relative idea is that they have to create fake inflation. Like, what if they created a um, fake inflation to, you know, stop sports or something like that? I mean, sports have not been affected at all by sports have not been affected at all by the quarantine and all that. So that's pretty unfortunate. We don't have like any real idea of, you know, excuse me. Yeah, we don't have any real idea of like the randomness that's going to incur if we have a Stalinist, if Stalinism kind of takes over. Okay, and so my point with the whole robotics thing is, you could call the robot the unconscious universe. Um, all right, and the idea is that if you have an unconscious universe, well, you say the universe can't be conscious. There's no idealism. There's no panpsychism. So the universe is not conscious. The universe is a robot. The invisible particles, the subbits or the subatomics are invisible, but they're robotic in the sense that they do what they need to do. I mean, is that an essential part? Is that an essential piece of information? I think it is, but to say that that's what, again, is the important subject in terms of atheism, evolution, something that is, again, I mean, you're not going to be able to really say that, the unconscious universe was able to create evolution. So I just get back to that. So I don't really like the word robot, just because, yeah, it just doesn't do enough for me. And you're just talking about the invisible universe, the indivisible working universe, and all that, and it doesn't really do enough for me to say, well, yeah, that's what I'm made of, or that's what I am. I mean, I wouldn't say that there's unconscious zombies really in, uh, or like around walking around or anything. I'm just saying that people should be like, I mean, the correct word would be just misinformed. The correct word is they don't comprehend what is being said, or it's not important to them. And that's the thing. I mean, you can make a lot. You can make it extremely. I mean, you can do a lot with like the robot metaphor, because you can basically say that it can do everything except have emotions. And so the idea is that, like, if it's playing chess, then it can just have an alpha, a beta, a gamma, et cetera, all the way to an omega. An alpha can have five. I mean, it's like the Greek alphabet is like 24 letters, and each letter can have like five exponents of moves. So it knows. So I mean, that would give you like, maybe, I don't know, 5 million different, maybe 5 billion different moves, right? So so basically, like a algorithmic computer can have 5 billion uh, deterministic um, deterministic plays on a chessboard, so it can beat the best player in chess. All right, but it can't. It cannot. What it cannot assign for is randomness in the universe, and it brings me to maybe my last point about determinism and how determinism is a philosophical understanding of this hyperbolic contingency that there is a positive and a negative going in going in two separate directions in a duality or in a dualistic universe that is contingent upon randomness or not a full understanding of how uh, things are going to be made to be. Like if I stab the knife if I put the knife in my if I stab the knife in my heart, then the knife is going to go in my heart. Like that's a deterministic idea. Like the undeterminist value of that is like I'm never going to fully know. Okay, you can know what's going to happen in the afterlife. Like I mean, you can have a serious understanding like that these cats and dogs souls are not flying into outer space and hanging out with like their other cat and dog buddies when their heart stops beating. Okay, but I'm just saying that's different than determinism and thinking that like okay you can come up with all these ideas like Stalinism or uh, Taylorism or Bezosism or quantum computers that are doing all of our jobs for us, or Skynet robots that are killing us, that are just devouring us, or humans forcing extinction through sterilizing waters and lands, or nuclear holocaust. Like it doesn't make a difference. I'm just saying those are a bunch of alpha, beta, gamma, all the way over to omega choices, and each one of those choices have an exponential um, indifference of how they're going to actually play out in the universe. So I'm just saying that's the randomness. The randomness lies in actually having to I mean it's kind of silly to say actually have to figure out or determine. I mean but that's kind of it, like kind of wait for the end of the movie to play out. I mean I don't think that I mean that's my point is what that's what a that's what a robot cannot do. Okay, so a human can say, oh I'm going to play out my life and I'm going to lie to my kids about heaven and I'm going to lie to my kids about hell or whatever, and I'm going to teach my kids to drink beer and watch sports, um, and I'm not going to worry about the economy or oil or science or anything like that. And that essentially, I mean, that essentially is it can be quite random, but the intuition is like the fact that there's somebody misinformed is the fact that they are misinformed. It doesn't mean that they're misinformed by randomness. It means that they're misinformed um, kind of deterministically, since there is a conglomerate of sports, since there is a conglomerate of beer, or since there is a conglomerate of reefer madness and alcohol prohibition and all these things, and people still want their things to do, or cigarettes are bad and cigarettes were made illegal because the government did something good for a change, like I don't know, the government stopped vaccinating little babies because California rules spread over the land, and I don't know, people just people were over it, and people started actually saying, "Oh yeah, I don't have enough money to have kids," and started having responsible sex, and started supporting and stopped supporting churches that just feed money into Israel and all the banking system anyway, and whatever. But who knows who the preachers and pastors are actually. Who knows whose pockets they're in? I mean, they probably just get as much money as they can. They get money from the church. They just invest their money. I mean, they probably just build new churches, right? They probably just build new churches, get more money, make more shows and all that shit. And yeah, they're like the they're like the negative of the medical system. Like there's the medical system, and then the negative inversion of that is like the church. And those will be all the people getting ready for Doomsday and Armageddon and all their stupid fucking bullshit. Getting ready to go to war with their community or something. Oh yeah, they forgot about the rich people there. But so whatever. I mean, yeah, they're kind of like the modern day. They're kind of like the modern day shaman. Like back in the day, you had Native American shamans who they were like supposed to be the last to die. They were kind of like the protected ones. And now you have like these fragile human Christians that just like to sit like in their little cave and wait for the war to be over or something before they go out and spend all their ammunition. So it wasn't really much of a physics video, but I am trying to just get into this heuristic idea more because even if you have a there was something else I wanted to get into. Well, yeah, my point is just the randomness. Robots can't do random at all. And then determinism, because a robot's determinism is prescribed to a number of outcomes. It can be prescribed to an infinite number of outcomes, such as pi. Like there can be a reinforcement of numbers of outcomes, and that's how a robot can beat the best human chess player in the world. But I'm just saying, uh, none of those outcomes or none of that algorithm is ever prescribed to. It never branches off. It just says, well, if this happened, like if Stalinism happens, then well, it wouldn't even say that, right? Because it can't do if and then. It can only do what's happening in the present moment. So it has to have a reinforcer. It says, okay, democracy is happening, or Stalinism is happening, or Arnold Ehret, or I'm going to be Arnold Ehret, or uh, make let's make tobacco illegal. I mean, I don't really know how to describe it, but in a sense, that's what a robot is doing. A robot is it just has a learned program that says if alpha, then beta. Okay, so it can never like in a sense in the uh, Heisenberg sense, it can never go backwards. In the Heisenberg sense, it can never reevaluate its beta, or I mean, it can never reevaluate from beta to alpha. So it can't say, if Stalinism is happening, then, I'm going to go to war or go like steal some bread. It can only say one or the other, because it's going to have that program, in my opinion, unless it's a HAL 3000 heuristic algorithmic computer, and it can actually make those legitimate contingencies. But other than that, it just has coding. It just has a microchip and it has coding, and those codes they obviously branch, but the branches of the thought patterns in its simulator they don't have the necessitative understanding to be able to say, well, they don't have the ability to have the memory. They don't have like any memory capacity to be able to say, well, this happened um, last time, so this time I'm going to do something different. And that's the same problem that these etherists or whatever these panpsychists, anybody really who gives any attention to the idea that there would be any memory effect in the universe. The fact that, like you're saying, there's a memory effect in the universe um, through these Einstein equations. I mean, please give me a break with these Einstein equations. I mean, Einstein, just because Einstein's using, a glass, like a glass mirror, you're basically transforming I mean, they're transformative ideas, okay? You're not transforming anything by using glass and a mirror, a reflective mirror, to be able to see something bigger and then put these equations on top over it. I mean, it's a fair understanding to say, yes, the moon gets bigger if you use a reflective mirror. If you use a reflective mirror, you're going to reflect light that's going to operate and essentially, I'm not going to say bend, but essentially, it's going to reflect enough light to the width that it needs to be able to expand the width and the diameter of the moon, and then in turn it's going. I mean, but it can still have a perfect it can still have a perfect sphere because you can do that at 360 degrees. So that's why that's why the moon would expand under reflection. Um, that's why the moon would expand under reflection. And if you're using the idea of refraction, I mean you're still like you can't even if you're using the idea of the naked eye, then yeah, there's going to be no difference. There's going to be no difference. But if you're just comparing, what do they call it? Flat? Do they call it? Um, I don't know. Newton, like it's like they call it like Newton gravity versus Einstein gravity. Yeah, Einstein gravity is not, anything different than Newton gravity. You're just saying I'm manipulating it with mirrors, with reflectors, and bits and subatomics and all of that. You're not really saying that there's anything different about Newton gravity and Einstein gravity. Einstein gravity, there's no difference. It's completely insane. It's completely deplorable. All right, so that's what I mean. I was trying to get into maybe like female determinism. If you have female determinism, with if you have female determinism in terms of like living in a patriarchy, okay, there's going to be a lot more. There might be a lot more sort of grassroots women psychology than we could ever really know about. I mean, in terms of like Me Too and conjectures like that, just in terms of men just being more animalistic, more like stronger, more abusive, verbally, physically, and then living in this sort of threatened state in a patriarchy. Like that is definitely like contingent upon sort of like a real determinism because I mean it doesn't make a difference like what the truth may be. If the lie is going to protect yourself from a threat, then you're most likely going to lie. I mean your first thought is to lie if it's going to protect you from a threat. Like I had to sort of lie about my mental illness, for example, and that was trying to protect me from the medical industry. Like for example, so the medical industrial complex. So I mean that is a way of viewing determinism, whereas something like a robot, it can only make choices that are contingent upon programming. So it either goes one way, it can either go one way. I mean, it only goes one way, right? It can't go both ways. It can't make a decision saying, well, um, it can't view something as a positive or a negative. So, yeah, and essentially you'd have to be able to create a nervous system for a robot to be able to get it to understand the difference between pain and pleasure and comfort and whatnot. And this whole idea that we're going to transfer consciousness, the scientific fictional idea that we can transfer consciousness into a robot is completely absurd. There's no such thing as a neural net. There's never going to be anything as a neural net. A neural net, as I've heard Elon Musk say, is just a net. It's just a contingency barrier. It's just a contingency barrier for you to be able to establish. Okay, I'm sinking. I'm sinking. I'm sinking. Like I better make a decision. Is this good or is this bad? Like, is the bad decision going to lead me to more good or lead other people to more good? Or is the good decision going to lead more people to more bad before I get into like just basically no man's land, which is the bottom of your hyperbolic? And so it's nothing to be really too interested in. I'd say just in terms, well, I mean, it's important, but it's not going to be taught like this, because they have things like ontology and deontology, and ontology is like there's this conscious universe or conscious universe with roboticism in the subatomics or subbits, subparticles. And we have to again understand that light is going to have, yeah, well, light in its pole. Well, I don't really want to get too much into that, but yeah, just that light can fill a room. If light fills a room, um, it's not like light is not going to travel along bits in terms of a 90-degree angle. Like if I open a door, if I open a door and the door cracks, okay, and my room is dark and the hallway is light, that light is going to it's not going to it's not going to move along diagonals against it's not gonna gravitate along diagonals to get first against subatomics. It's constantly going to hit on off on off on off, and those on offs are what is going to cause that metaphorical wave. So that metaphorical wave is going to eventually fill the light all the way to the corner. But all the light ever did was just move essentially at the speed of light to fill up the room all the to get all the way to the corner of the room. So it essentially, yeah, it essentially subverted its energy, but it never traveled along a diagonal or never traveled along like anything lower than a 90-degree angle. It just constantly reflected. It constantly reflected. Now I am saying that light can reflect. Oh, sorry, reflect. It can refract. Light can refract off of other light, but what they're doing is, I mean, they could run the wave particle duality a million times, okay, and just try to find a well, they could run the double slit or the single impediment, and they could run that a million times, and they could try to see if there was any differences, and when they ran it, I mean, really? Like that's what they actually do. It's like, but there's no, I mean, there's never going to be any differences that show you that there's like dark matter within the little subsection of the universe. Like there's never going to be any subsection of the light experiment that is going to be able to show you subatomics. Just because the pattern changed, just because there was a small contingency of change, like maybe a 1 or 2% change, doesn't mean that they were able to sense gravitational waves. Like they're saying there was a small change, 1 or 2% change, and that contingency upon the change is our absolute for subatomic change or bit change.
I know there's not an extreme amount of physics in here. However, when I was saying there's a hyperbolic way of thinking, and humans, it's like an hourglass with uh, infinity down the middle. It's a Minkowski, really. I mean, it's a hyperboloid with just like infinity down the middle. But in terms of it on a graph, if you see Minkowski, Minkowski just has two triangles. You could even say intersecting the zero, and the zero could just mark like infinite positive or infinite negative possibilities. So it's also sort of acquiring the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Um, the Bohr atom. I mean, you could say that the Bohr atom is kind of a gateway to just more sort of semantics over kinetic energy or the quantum reality, which is not very scientific. I mean, it can get scientific. Yeah, one thing that I didn't account for before was that there could just be a reflection principle, and a reflection principle would just mean that anytime that photons are interacting with photons, they always have to reflect. They can never diffract. Okay, so a photon can never diffract. Essentially, um, in a photoelectric effect, you could say they do diffract. In a photoelectric effect, you're obviously dealing with the quantum and you're dealing with subatomics. So you're saying that if the photon travels close enough, uh, to any material, whether it be metal or whether it be metal or carbon or something. I don't know. I don't know. I don't even really know what rocks are made out of. Whether it be like whatever metal, whatever metal, whatever rock contingency or contingency it's made out of, it'll hit, it'll hit that metal because there is an extra force guiding it, or it would essentially be able to diffract. But my point is, if you're dealing with if you're dealing with real photons, you would have realized that there's always just an on off, and if the off is at 90 degrees, eventually that 90 degrees will be filled out. But like in a single impediment experiment, it'll always have to reflect, and that reflection will do the little zigzag until it gets to that 90-degree pattern. It would never essentially it would never diffract. It would never be able to diffract at that angle unless you're dealing with a quantum theory, a quantum field theory. So if you deal with the atomic field theory or the particle field theory, you'd understand that it's constant reflection. If you deal with the quantum field theory, you would understand that diffraction is possible through the subatomic bits because the subatomic bits will guide its gravity. But I think a reflection I think a reflection standard is much more applicable to reality, just because, well, it's kind of obvious. Yeah, like a light, like if something is traveling in a ray, and it hits something else in a ray, you could say that those two rays have absolute width, diameter, or whatever it is. So you could say that there could be some rays that do in fact diffract, but they're not refracting off of the entire ray. It shouldn't be one ray. I mean, you could say it's 100 rays per ray. So if there's two colliding, and maybe 75%, maybe 75 of those rays are going to make the diffraction, and then there's going to be a reflection from the ray with 100 rays. So I mean, it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more extreme, but it makes more sense than quantum field theory, because quantum field theory will say that the double slit experiment causes diffraction because uh, there is the quantum field theory and the wave has to equate that. But it's really just using the subatomic sort of like this subatomic bit thing, and that's what's really doing it. So that's a little bit unfair, and yeah, it's not the best case. It's not like the best case um, scenario. It doesn't. I mean, it definitely doesn't, do anything for transformers because, well, I mean, in terms of the, well, that's just DC and AC anyway. And then, yeah, another thing with the heuristic algorithmic computer or the feeling computer. Yeah, I mean, we just have another problem because you could say something like uh, second sexism, second sexism, or people might say, well, second sexism is basically deterministic since it's a quality of this evolution process, and this evolution process uh, has sort of raised the standard for female species, and now female species are supposed to do men's jobs and all that stuff. It's probably not looking enough down the line. But I'm just saying it could have its potential. I mean, I'm just saying it has its potential. It has its scheming. It has its scheming mechanisms. So does white privilege. So does racism. Uh, these all have these all have like scheming property, like, well, scheming mechanisms that can be used or utilized to kind of further um kind of just further thoughts and things like that. But I mean, it doesn't necessarily really have anything to do with determinism. I'm saying, I mean, I'm kind of making a point too that a robot wouldn't be able to understand the difference between uh second sexism in evolution or something like that. Maybe there's really not a clear difference. So these types of, I mean, you could say that that's why that the browsers have gotten a lot worse over the years, just because there has been a lot more. Uh, there's just been a ton of browsing. I mean, so the browsing now has gotten to the point where it can't like the computer is obligated to run certain algorithms and everything, but it just doesn't have any, there's not enough for the computer. I mean, the computer can search something up like da da da, you know, you search 500,000 things in 3 seconds on something you type, but that's just because it's an algorithm. So the algorithm is already built into the processor, and the processor was constantly being updated and coded to a certain extent. It was constantly being coded, updated, all that stuff, but more and more people were using it. So the information just got more and more clumped and more sort of diluted from the truth. And that's why there's like no clear, uh, there's no clear data on how, on how it was before when nobody was really using the internet and the internet just uh, popped up. So, all right, I'm gonna stick with my double umbrella universe theory and my uh, hourglass thing I was kind of getting into, but I will stick with the hourglass. Just because, yeah, I think it's a better interpretation than none. No, I think it's a better interpretation. Well, I think it's a better interpretation for me. It's at least I can understand something, and yeah, if I see some cavemen, like in 5 years or something, and they're trying to understand the universe, I'm probably going to tell them that it's a double umbrella with hourglasses. And I guess my big mistake was that I was trying to incorporate the hourglass around objects like around Earth or around the moon or around a neutrino or around a neutron. When the reality is that the hourglass should be temporarily in, because I mean I'm kind of a proponent of many worlds. I'm just saying it should be around objects, so it should be actually around the moon and around the Earth. And because you're talking about a description that is based in zero gravity, so even though it can be placed in gravity, such as if you if you drop a 20-pound rock off of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, or you drop a 20-kilogram rock off the Leaning Tower of Pisa against a 10-kilogram rock, uh, with the Leaning Tower of Pisa, they're both going to fall at the same time, basically, because both of those falls, the gravitational force is essentially going to be, um, I mean, we're talking about hourglasses, so where the sand would fall in an hourglass, that's going to be essentially the same, and you're not going to be able to tell the difference. They might fall like 0.001 difference, or they might fall 0.001 difference. Like the 20-pound mass might fall like just slightly faster. I mean, that's in cycling and bicycles and professional cycling. Technically, the heavier the bike is, technically for downhill, like downhill cycling, like if when you're going like 80 kilometers or 100 kilometers an hour or 60 miles per hour, you essentially want a heavier bike with sharper geometry, and um, the sharper geometry is what causes less drag. So you have your bike, sharper geometry, that would cause less drag. So you could do an experiment where you throw, let's say, like a pyramid. You have like a cube, you have like a 10-pound cube and a 10-pound pyramid, and you're throwing the pyramid with its point facing the ground. So that would be like a better description of of what would fall faster. I mean, or a better description, I guess, of like the drag effect, because essentially, if you're talking about a cube and you're throwing against that square, like the actual square of the rock, that square is going to, it's causing drag because it's hitting more particles. So the particles have to get around the actual square of the cube. Where if you have a pyramid, it doesn't really, it's not going to make much. It's not like essentially according to engineering. Okay, according to engineering, unless you had something that was behind uh, the square of the pyramid that is basically going like not affecting the drag, right? Because if you have this point, if you have the point of the pyramid and the the particles have to get around the particles have to get around. Okay, and this is basically in Earth gravity. Okay, so I mean I'm not talking about like space gravity or zero gravity or anything like that, but the particles have to get around the okay the point. And when they get to the base of the pyramid, it's not going to have any effect. Like the drag has already been numerated, it's already been energized, it's already been accounted for. So the only thing that really matters is how the only thing that really matters in Earth gravity when you're actually trying to look at drag is like of uh, the actual shape of the objects that you'd be like throwing off the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So I'm saying you might see a pyramid facing down fall faster than a cube if you threw that, and if they were the same size, you might see that, or it might have to be a lot higher. But basically, the propensity of, I mean, it's a lot like um, if you're like free falling. I would say if you're free falling from a parachute, you're free falling. If somebody's like waving their arms all over the place uh, like they've never skydived before, then that person is going to be causing a lot more drag. So they're actually essentially going to be going slower than the person who is calm and uh, relaxed, because that calm, relaxed feeling, even though you're going faster, you're actually you're actually getting a like a reinforcement of drag. Instead of flailing all over the place, your arms are flailing all over the place, you're going to go slower because of what you're first hitting. Okay, you're being sucked in by Earth's gravity, and um, you're hitting particles or bits at a different rate than if you were to or energy, or you know the Earth's gravitational accounting computer. Like you're hitting all that stuff at a chaotic rate. Okay, so then like that's only going to be your drag. But I'm just saying, um, if your if your drag is relaxed or whatever, or if you're like trying to sharpshoot the particles, if you're trying to sharpshoot the massless particles and everything like that, the invisible particles, and you're just diving and you're basically skydiving, you're actually doing an actual dive, then yeah, the only drag that is really affected is well, it's obviously going to be your head, but it's going to be your arms and your legs too. So if your arms and your legs started to flail out, if they started to flail out in some measurable way, not that I think that would be really, I think that would be really hard to do, but um, then yeah, the force that hits your helmet and hits your arms and hits your legs, that's going to be affected. But if you have if everything's pinched in and you're doing an actual dive, your arms are pinched in and your legs are pinched in, then yeah, you're not really going to have much of a drag, and you're going to be, like basically sharpshooting massless particles. So essentially, that's like what my argument is against, just how what was it, Galileo? I don't even know Galileo, how or one of the Greeks did their little bit, because yeah, they're just using one weight that is bigger and one weight that is smaller. They're not accounting for drag. They're not accounting for engineering of like a better experiment or anything like that in their equation. They just have two blocks. But if you used like like a really sharp object, or say like a spear, if you dropped a 20-pound spear against a I'm just saying this would be the best argument if you dropped a 20-pound spear and you dropped a 20-pound block off the Leaning Tower of Pisa and you saw which one fell first and they both fell first, and you'd know that, well, there's not enough gravity to account for. Like, Earth has way too much gravity to be able to account for. So I'm just saying, with the hourglass thing, Earth is an hourglass and it has sand particles and all that stuff, and whatever object, okay, whatever uh, mass, whatever object that has visibility, whatever you can see, because you can see different things through different uh, machines like infrared or um, UV light, just the monochromatic light or whatever it's called. Um, yeah, you sorry, I got dropped on my head as a baby. Um, you still have like this hourglass. I mean, obviously, if you have if Earth is an hourglass and it's connected to two objects, so there's two uh, basically linear planes of gravity that something is going to drop. I'll do the lever thing in a second. Yeah, you have like a 20-pound spear, and you have a 20-pound block, and basically the idea is that there is sand just within the energy of Earth, and that, according like depending on how much sand that is like dependent on how much gravity it can actually. So that could be your scalar, like the sand in an object. I might work with it. I don't know. It's a little bit stupid to create one of these theories now, but um, according to how much sand your actual Earth has, and according to how much sand is that like in ratio with the actual spear, the 20-pound spear and the 20-pound block, how much do those objects have? Okay, so there's three objects: Earth, the 20-pound block, and the 20-pound spear. Earth might be 500 billion kajillion pounds. Therefore, it'll overcompensate for any difference that this spear would have against this block in terms of drag. Because drag really is, I mean, even if it's 100-pound spear compared to a 20-pound block, will the 20-pound spear basically have enough? I mean, the what I'm saying is um, it'd have to have more sand, okay, in its time capsule or in its hourglass capsule than the than the actual block, okay? And what would create a faster uh, acceleration, okay, a faster acceleration in this gravity, okay? I'm not talking about with weight and work and all that stuff, because there's different limitations, especially in engineering. Like, something in engineering, you'd say you want something lighter because it'll accelerate faster. But if we're dropping something, then we essentially the only way we could increase the acceleration if we're dropping something is essentially by making something with uh, approximately less drag. Like, a spear would have less drag than a block. Okay, so that idea is pretty simple, but I'm just saying, Earth is going to have sand in its end of the hourglass, and you could do this. You could do this with neutrinos, muons, gluons, electrons, neutrons, protons. I didn't want to miss any, and anything in the subatomics. You could do this, and you just say, well, the neutrino has less sand in its hourglass, but you're not talking about actual sand passing in and out. You're just talking about the gravitational pull. Like, why isn't it gravitating? I mean, you could say that when it gets into actual when things get into actual orbit, then you mess around with it. But yeah, probably not doing that today. My point with the universe is that it's just so inconceivable to talk about how
the universe had to cool down after the Big Bang. I mean, it's just silly. The universe had to cool down after the Big Bang, and then you're talking about how all this stuff is now colder. So it basically did like a down and an up, and now we're in the universe where it's getting hotter again because we're the expanding universe, but essentially it came from almost infinitesimally hotter than where we're at now. But when it actually created stars and solar systems and galaxies, it was cooling down. It was cooling down so much further. So it's just a completely ridiculous theory that we live that that's even a real idea. Um, Considering the old universe is like infinite, like I mean, isn't it infinitesimally hotter than our sun? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, and if it's not, I mean, isn't our sun's like 4 million Kelvin, and the universe, the Big Bang, started off at 10 billion Kelvin or something? So we're just talking about stars here. So that's a little bit ridiculous. It's just really stupid. And then you have like this cosmological background radiation that's filled with black holes. I mean, and black holes are freezing. So I mean, how do you have two theories that are in complete opposite of each other? It's just ridiculous. Like, yeah, if I see a caveman, I'll be like, no, we just live in two umbrellas, and the two umbrellas just go from there and just basically go from work and force and distance and force times distance and how that has to inverse and all that stuff. And yeah, try to remember some Newtonian shit because that's the only thing that really works for a universe. You have to start one place and expand outwards. I mean, a cosmic background radiation. Aliens came down to me from planet Zeno and told me that oh, we live in a Big Bang cosmic background radiation. I'm sure I could like be like a prophet of my land. I'm sure I could be like the real leader of my land. Like, yeah, get the fuck out of here. Fucking slice that guy's neck out. Like all you fucking people who pay for slaughterhouses. You fucking goddamn piece of shit. So yeah, I couldn't get into well, I guess there was oh yeah, the lever. Oh yeah, so the lever or the lever. Well, yeah, the lever. Like if you drop something, like if you drop a 20-pound block against a lever again that goes against a a 10-pound block, or let's say a 5-pound block. Say a 5-pound block. So I have a 20-pound block. I'm going to drop it against a 5-pound block. I mean, I'm also getting into cohomology and homology and the simplex of things like this. These are technically simplexes, and the complexes is what they use to like hold the accounting for Earth's gravity. So they have all this accounting, they have all this math and accounting, and that's how they do their cosmic inflation theory and all that stuff, and that's how it works. Because like these, I guess, the concrete ideas or the simplex ideas of what happens, but as soon as you give the simplex ideas a calculator, then it turns into these complex conjunctures that are very expansive, and they just are cosmological. They have nothing to do with Earth, okay? And they're just general relative ideas that are supposed to connect and intercept gravity and stuff like that, but they don't have anything to do with simplex, um, like I guess ideas that you can give any coherency to. Like they just have decoherence and all that stuff. But anyway, like if you're dropping this 20-pound block against a 5-pound block on a lever, like wherever you put your fulcrum or whatever, doesn't really make a difference. But essentially, what I'm saying is that okay, this is like the 20-pound block is an hourglass, the 5-pound block is an hourglass. Uh, Essentially, if you're talking about the fulcrum and the lever in terms of what type of force what type of force you're accounting for. I mean, I'm still talking about horizontal, like, okay, so talking about horizontal gravity and all this stuff. You still have to account for Earth's extreme gravity, and then you still have to obviously account for the fulcrum's gravity. Okay, so the fulcrum would have very little gravity in terms of hourglass or time. I mean, we're essentially talking about gravity versus time, and where there is less sand within the universe in terms of an hourglass, there would be essentially more potential for, I don't want to say more potential for gravity, but more vacuum, which is
kind of obscure too. So I got to work on that. But um, yeah, the lever, the lever just has like uh, obviously less sand, and the fulcrum has even less sand. But this is like the potential thing, right? So you know that the 5 pound block has less sand, and the 20-pound block has more sand. Okay, so you can't do any kooky kinetic energy shit here because it's going to fall at a gravitational rate, and the 5 pound block is going to fly at a certain gravitational rate, and that's already sort of mathematically accounted for. So yeah, but I'm just saying in terms of like this hourglass thing, and how if you just like think of bits as particles of sand or something like that. I was kind of just saying that, and before, yeah, I was kind of dumbfounded by my intelligence, and I was thinking like, yeah, oh, I could put like umbrellas around each object to create gravity, but really you just have to say the object has gravity within itself. Yeah, because I'd really like to say, I'd really like to see. I mean, it's impossible because of this cohomogeny homology thing, this cohomology homology complex. It makes it impossible to be able to create a universe, sort of like a static universe, um, with the material of the universe coherent to that exact object. So this cohomogeny thing, is like Einstein looking at the solar eclipse and Einstein not looking at the solar eclipse. It's something like that. It's just the change in distortion between using a telescope and not using a telescope. Sees the moon is much smaller than the sun with his naked eye, and to my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's cohomology, and homology is just E equals mc squared, saying there's two constants. Or homology is sort of like, yeah, they're talking about like coherence and geometric unity. So that's what's really poor about these terms, in that they don't really play any coherence. They can't really give you any coherence. General relativity can't give you any coherence in terms of like Earth gravity and stuff like that, because we know it's all accounting, especially because you're just saying E equals mc squared is just a 20-pound block falling, and the 5 pound block shooting up. That's all real. That's all I'd really say it is. It's not really, but you're not really saying the energy is going up every single time, like it's circular energy or anything like that. You're not really saying that. You're just saying it's one. It's a hypothesis. It's a hypothesis testing a theory that can never really be proven. The mainstream theory for the Big Bang is that the Big Bang was, you know, 20,000 times hotter than our sun. And somehow it cooled down, and somehow it got hotter, and somehow it cooled down, and somehow it got hotter, and that's cosmic inflation, which is just ridiculous. Parthenogenesis, yeah, I was trying to get into parthenogenesis. Like, there's some animals, I think snakes, and supposedly in history, there's been some humans that have had parthenogenesis, which is just basically the embryo fertilized itself. And so we were talking about like just how the universe could create itself. Which is so deceptive, because we're not even talking about, again, we're not even talking about how uh, the universe created neurons. Okay, we're not going to be able to talk about it. Okay, we're just not going to be able to. Like I said, I'm gonna have to be explaining this shit to fucking cavemen. And so yeah, what the hell? And then the Tesla energy. I didn't get into Gauss's law or Hilbert space. I didn't really understand what Hilbert space was. I didn't really understand what Gauss's law was. Um, and then yeah, just like this medical apartheid and all this stuff that everybody's talking about. But yeah, parthenogenesis, Tesla, you know, um, I obviously I obviously think that energy. I do really think that energy is a deception. But the way they run these quote unquote transformers, or the theory of their transformers. I mean, yeah, I also wanted to say, like, I did see some stuff back in the 1800s. So in the 19th century and the 1800s, this is like basically around the time Einstein was born, and this could be also around the time of the Industrial Revolution, like right before it. I did see there was like some data on, I can't remember their names, but they're all in line with Tesla. Like they were all the pre-Tesla people. And these people were talking about like really sort of I mean, I don't know how true it is, but really complex, like magnoelectric or magnetoelectric towns, and running towns off magnetoelectric just variability depending on the weather, how all that stuff. They weren't talking about necessarily creating solar panels, but they were talking about how we should be able to run like a town and all this stuff off free energy, and they would just have like one big they would have like one big magnetic conductor, like free, like one big free energy magnetic conductor or something. So I didn't really understand it too much. Like it was like they were just sticking like a 10-foot like copper pole in the middle of their town, and trying to like circle like their little village with like like a like 3 foot by 3 foot wide tube of copper or something. So I mean, it was like really like it was like really like futuristic, I guess, in terms of like, yeah, like I don't know, we just totally got bought out uh by politicians and like the buyers, like the people who, I mean, the people, like basically you're saying like the investors, they invested into the wrong thing. They invested into the temporal, the, the, the temporal solutions like oil. So you could say like they're like the Tesla people who, or the people who eventually, uh, turned into Tesla. I don't, their names are pretty difficult, but like, yeah, like, Steinmetz. Is it Steinmetz? Uh, Steinmetz Hobby Side. Like the Dillard people. Like the Dillard people. Like I did go back to like maybe the 1830s, 1850s, and I did see that they were actually trying to they were actually trying to propose how they could just run villages off of um, this dielectric electricity, or the magneto dielectric effects and stuff like that. And I mean, it's totally obvious. Like the Dillards of today would be correct in saying that these these people were buried, or we're talking about the cataclysm, I guess. But yeah, so anyway, the cataclysm is a cataclysm because yeah, the investors invested in the wrong thing. They invested into the greedy shit. They didn't invest into uh, the stuff that could actually run anything. So again, I mean, this makes everything arbitrary. I mean, it's like saying, oh yeah, the guy who invested into Steve Jobs, the guy who invested into the iPhones did a good job. Well, I mean, it doesn't make any difference because they made the first mistake. And then, so when they made the first mistake in drilling for oil, I mean, it was already done. Like as soon as they started drilling for oil, they they invested into drilling for oil, okay? And they invested heavily, and so the first mistake was already made in the 1800s, and they couldn't take it back. So, so yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I can try to do the galaxy again with the hourglass again. Anything, it's just I'm just saying anything with actual mass, actual particles that you can see that are visible, that aren't subatomics. I mean, essentially, you can do it in the visible and the invisible spectrum. But I'm just saying, if you're looking at the galaxy. They can work, they can work homogeneously like that, but they can never work co-homogeneously. I mean, it just you can never really give that descriptive order. So create your little, quantum computer to be able to, back that up. But like you can never be able to actually describe energy and give it actual properties at the same time. Same with kinetic energy. I'm just saying you can't do that in one serious simulation. Okay, so you wouldn't be able to describe it, so it can't have a description. The cohomology of those, like of energy or of kinetic energy, and force is a homogeneous experiment. Correct me if I'm wrong, but force is a homogeneous like interpretation, so long as you have weight in terms of like your gravity. But in terms of like these, um, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe physics is all cohomologous or whatever, cohomogeneous. So I'm just saying, with the galaxy, obviously, you have your black hole in the middle, and anything that is mass has particles. Um, that looks like it has force has sand in the hourglass. So the black hole wouldn't have any sand. So I should have interpreted it more as that. But because I mean, it's not only equivalent to time, so over time, those things are going to have, over time, those little bits of sand are going to have they're going to have an effect on the galaxy. However, there's nothing in the black hole. So just because a black hole can keep its structure, that it can rotate um, the two ends of the galaxy. I'm just saying the black hole's not doing that. What's outside of the mass is doing that, and the galaxy is actually drifting. So particles on one end are allowing particles on the other end to just have a linear distribution, if you will, to be able to, they're subsidizing they're subsidizing each other, and that's why the galaxy is able to rotate the way it's able to rotate. There'd be less sand at the ends of the galaxy because they'd carry less load, they'd carry less gravitational force, and they get less and less until you hit the vacuum, until you hit the vacuum of space. But they have greater gravity to be able to drift in that vacuum the way they do. So that's what I'm going with for now. And yeah, so parthenogenesis, sort of like this virgin birth shit. Oh well, like it seems like only reptiles can do it anyway. Maybe fish, amphibians, but yeah, that has nothing to do with how deplorable the Big Bang Theory actually is in terms of a coherency, or I mean, what are they really doing? I mean, in terms of its literacy, literally, it's just a little bit crazy. So I mean, anybody can really say anything. You say the fucking universe is an umbilical cord practically. Um, just a bunch of fucking umbilical cords. And then you have parthenogenesis, Gauss's law. Well, what was Hilbert space? Hilbert space was kind of like this toroidal thing with the electromagnetism and Gauss's law. Yeah, so they're using the toroidal effect. That's how they just equate everything to basically hydrostatic electricity. If you have Hilbert space, you can use hydrostatic electricity in anything because I don't want to get into it too much, but hydrostatic electricity can just give you everything you need to know about magnetism and the waves of not the waves of magnetism, but the lines of magnetism, the magnetic lines. It's just an excuse for that, and that seems to me to be hydrostatic electricity. That's Hilbert space. You can just have an infinite understanding of the electromagnetic dielectric magneto effect or whatever. Um, and then you have Gauss's law, which is like this. It's like a similar thing, but you do it in a two-dimensional plane, or you do it in a circle. You do it in like a Newton's gravity. But then you have this. like this I don't think I'm getting these backwards, but then you have like this little piece left over, and this little piece is what you can take, and you can that's how you can do your subsections of the physical universe that way. So that's the way I was interpreting those pictures or definitions, or like baseless descriptions of reality. Like you just have like a little like if you have like if you have a vegan pizza, that's like your description of the Newtonian two-dimensional flat plane. But then you're saying you can take a little Cauchy slice or something, and you can take that out, and that's Gauss's law, and you can use that Cauchy slice to be able to derive just like inverse properties of what you had in your original vegan pizza. So you can maybe take out a vegan pizza slice and take that vegan pizza slice, and that's one definition of like what you'd say is reaching the cosmic radiation, or you could say that's one place where you can. I mean, again, they're doing all these. They're not doing any ground experiments, right? They're only doing experiments that are just sailing over everybody's head, and they're meant to be cosmological. So they're not going to be really anything. They're not going to have anything like based in. They're not going to have anything really based in Earth, like that is foundational, except for uh, basically except for like mathematics, or accounting for what they believe is, true and all that stuff. They're not using Heisenberg principle. They're not using the real Heisenberg principle, saying, let's put down our pieces of chalk and like talk about this. They're using the Schrodinger, and the Schrodinger is what has these infinite numerable, ways to patternize the cosmology, and therefore base them in Earth reality, or base them in Earth mathematics, and base them in Earth simulations and things like that. So they're using Schrodinger's. They're not using the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Make sure you understand that. So yeah. Anyway, at least the mentally well. That's what the mentally well are doing. So, and Gauss's law, Hilbert space. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks for listening.